have pulled a lot of things out of that water. Cargo pods, a dead man once, a whole ground car that fell off the upper ramp during a storm. You work the sump long enough on a drowning world, you stop being surprised by what the tide gives you. But I never expected to pull out a soldier that 3 armies were looking for, and I sure never expected her to have fur. Let me tell you how it happened, slow the way it really went, because if I rush it you won't believe the end, and I need you to believe the end. My name is Rourke. Back then I ran the night crew on Dredge 9, out on Havoc's Tidehold. If you've never heard of it, don't feel bad. Nobody chooses to hear about Tidehold. It's a refinery station bolted onto a water world so far out that the star looks like a coin at the bottom of a well. The whole planet is ocean. No land. Not one island. Just water going down forever and the Tidehold floating on top of it like a rusted crown. Humans built it. That part matters, so remember it. Nobody thought we could. The big species laughed when Earth signed the lease. A water world that deep, with storms that could fold a warship in half. They said let the monkeys try. They said we'd sink inside a year. We didn't sink. We anchored gravity spikes 40 kilometers down into the crust. We floated the refinery on a ring of buoyancy cells the size of city blocks. We built seawalls out of hardened water, actual water, frozen solid by field emitters, cheaper than steel and self-repairing. When a wave came in tall as a mountain, the wall drank it. The other species came around eventually. They always do. They came to buy the deep-water minerals we scraped up. They came to dock their pretty ships, and a few of them came to work, because credits are credits and the pay was good if you didn't mind the smell of ozone and salt in your lungs every waking hour. That was Tidehold, loud, wet, blue-lit at night by the drone lamps that floated over the water like fireflies that forgot how to be small. And me, Rourke, 41 years old, bad knee, worse temper, running Dredge 9 because nobody else wanted the night shift. Now let me set the actual night. Because the night was strange before she showed up. I want you to understand that. Something felt wrong hours before I knew why. It started with the fish going quiet. You spend enough time on the sump platform, you learn the sounds. There's a species of surface fish out there, glow things. They hum when they feed. Every night. A low warbling hum that comes up through the deck plates. You stop hearing it the way you stop hearing your own breathing. That night it stopped, all at once, like someone put a hand over the ocean's mouth. I noticed and I didn't notice, you know how that is. My hands kept working. We were pulling a mineral haul up from the deep line, the big claw arms groaning as they lifted the net. But some animal part of my brain sat up straight and said something's coming. Then the sky changed. Not weather ships. 3 of them, coming in low and fast under the cloud line, no running lights, which is illegal as sin over a civilian station. Conquered cruisers. You'd know them if you saw them, long and gray and shaped like knives, that dead smooth hull the Conquered loves so much. The Conquered is the big authority out there. The assembly of 1,000 worlds, they call themselves in the speeches. Everyone else just calls them the Conquered and gets out of their way. 3 war cruisers screaming in over a mining station in the middle of the night, with their lights off. I got on the crew line. Everybody eyes up. We got Conquered traffic, no clearance. Hold the haul, hold the arms, nobody moves fast, nobody looks guilty. That was the rule out on Tidehold. When the big species came around, you went still. You made yourself boring. You did not give them a reason. The cruisers didn't dock. They spread out over the water in a triangle, maybe 2 kilometers apart, and they lit the ocean. I have never seen anything like it, and I hope I never do again. Each ship dropped a search cone, a beam of hard white light so bright it turned the black water into daylight for 100 meters down. 3 of them sweeping. They were looking for something in the sea. And whatever they were looking for, they wanted it bad. Because a Conquered cruiser costs more than this whole station, and here were 3 of them. Burning fuel, hunting the deep dark of a nothing world at the bottom of the map. I remember thinking, cold and clear, I don't want to know what that is. I was going to get to know it real well. The wave hit maybe 20 minutes into their search. Not a natural wave. When a cruiser pivots that hard that low, it shoves the water. One of them banked and the swell rolled out, and it came across the surface toward Dredge 9 like a shrug from something enormous. "Brace!" I shouted, and we grabbed the rails, and the platform lifted and dropped and slammed back down, and cold spray came over the side and hit us like a slap. When I got my eyes clear, I saw her. The wave had thrown something up onto our loading shelf, the low flat part of the platform, right at the waterline where the claw arms set the nets down. A shape, dark and long and wrong. My first thought was one of the big deep fish, the predators, because it was that size. Then it moved, and it was trying to get up. I ran, bad knee and all, because whatever it was drowning, and there is a thing wired into me, into a lot of us, I think, that when something is drowning right in front of you, your body goes before your brain gets a vote. I skidded down onto the loading shelf and got a look at her, and I froze for one whole second. It was a person, sort of. She was built like us in the bones, 2 arms, 2 legs, upright, but she was covered in fur. Short, wet, slate gray with dark rosettes across her shoulders and down her back, like a leopard from the old Earth pictures. Her face was long and feline, whiskered, and her ears were flattened back with panic and pain. She was maybe as tall as me but leaner, all cord and muscle under that soaked pelt. And she was tangled to the waist in one of our own dredge nets, half in the water, the sea trying to pull her back under the shelf with every drag of the swell. Her eyes found mine, big amber eyes slit down the middle, full of water and terror and something else I only understood later. She was going under, the net had her. Each time the ocean pulled, her head dipped below the surface, and each time it came back up she got a smaller breath. She had maybe a minute left. Less. I didn't think about the cruisers. I swear on my mother I didn't think about them once. There was a person drowning and I had hands. "Kesh, to me, cutters move." I screamed up at the platform, and then I got down flat on the wet deck and grabbed the net where it had her. Up close she smelled like salt and blood and something warm underneath, like an animal after running. Her claws, she had claws, actual claws, and when she felt my hands she lashed out on instinct and one of them opened my forearm from wrist to elbow. I've still got the scar. I didn't even feel it then. Adrenaline is a hell of a painkiller. "I've got you," I said, dumb, because she couldn't understand me and I couldn't understand her. "But you say it anyway. I've got you, stop fighting me, I've got you." The net had a knot at her hip where 2 lines crossed, and the sea had pulled it iron tight. My fingers weren't going to do it. Toomey came sliding down beside me with the plasma cutters, and I grabbed one and jammed it into the knot and pulled the trigger, and the line parted with a hiss and a smell of burnt cord. She came free all at once, and the weight of her nearly took us both into the water. I got an arm across her chest and hauled backward with everything my back had left in it, and Toomey grabbed my belt, and Kesh grabbed Toomey, and the 3 of us dragged this soaking alien leopard woman up onto the dry part of the shelf like we were landing the world's ugliest fish. She coughed. God, she coughed. Water came up out of her in a rush and she rolled onto her side and heaved and gasped, and her whole body shook and she breathed, ragged and wet and alive. She was alive. I sat back on the wet deck and my arm finally started screaming, and I looked at the blood running off my elbow and I laughed. Just once. That crazy laugh you do when the fear has nowhere else to go. That's when I noticed the platform had gone silent. I looked up. My whole crew was standing there, and not one of them was looking at her. They were looking at the sky. The 3 cruisers had stopped sweeping. All 3 search cones had swung around and locked onto Dredge 9. Onto us. 3 pillars of white light, so bright I had to shield my eyes, all pointing at the small wet shape breathing on my loading shelf. They'd found what they were looking for. And I just pulled it out of the water. Here's a thing about fear. Real fear, not the drowning kind. The drowning kind is fast and hot. This other kind is slow and cold, and it starts in your stomach and climbs. I felt it climb. Because there is a very specific feeling to being small and unarmed, and standing in the light of 3 warships that have decided you are their business now. The lead cruiser broke off and came in to dock. Not gently. It slammed its boarding ramp down onto our upper deck hard enough to buckle a plate, and the ramp opened, and out they came. Conquered wardens, soldiers. If you've never seen conquered wardens up close, count that as a good thing. They're one of the big warrior species. The Drivka, tall as a doorframe, 4 arms, plated hide the color of old bone, faces like something between an insect and a skull. They move wrong. Too smooth. Too fast for their size. And they carry rail lances that can put a hole through a bulkhead. A dozen of them came down the ramp and spread across my platform in a fan, weapons up, and the drone lamps caught all those lance barrels and threw the light back cold. Behind them came the officer. You could tell he was the officer because he didn't hurry and nobody covered him. He was Drivka too, but older, with a long gray sash of rank and a burn scar across half his face where the plating had melted and healed wrong. He walked to the front of his soldiers and looked down at the Leopard woman on my deck, and then he looked at me, and then he spoke. His translator was cheap and it came out flat, no feeling in it, which somehow made it worse. Human, step away from the fugitive. Fugitive. I looked down at her. She'd gotten herself up to a sitting position, back against a cargo strut, and she was watching the soldiers with her ears flat and her lips pulled back off her teeth, long teeth, predator teeth, but she wasn't running. There was nowhere to run. She was cornered on a floating platform in the middle of an endless sea, soaked and exhausted and bleeding from a gash on her thigh I hadn't even noticed. And she put herself between the soldiers and me. I want you to sit with that. She'd been drowning 10 minutes ago. She had every reason on the wheel of the galaxy to save herself. And she'd shifted her body quietly so that if a soldier fired, it'd hit her before it hit me. I didn't understand that yet either. I understood it later. I understand it now better than I understand almost anything. Human, the officer said again, step away. My mouth was dry, my arm was bleeding, my crew was frozen, and something in me, the same dumb thing that runs toward drowning people, made me stay exactly where I was. She was drowning, I said. My voice came out rough. I pulled her out of the water, that's all, that's the whole thing. You have interfered in a conquered recovery, the officer said. Under the Assembly statutes, obstruction of a Class 1 recovery is a capital matter. Step away and it will be forgotten. Remain and you become part of the recovery. Part of the recovery, nice words for it. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count. The smart move was to step away. Everyone knew it. Kesh was staring at me and mouthing, "Move, Rourke, move." This wasn't my fight. I didn't know this creature. I didn't owe her anything. 20 minutes ago she didn't exist to me. But I'd had my arm around her chest when she took her first breath. That does something. I can't explain it better than that. When you feel another living thing come back from dying against your own body, some cable runs between you that you didn't ask for and can't cut. I didn't step away. I looked at that officer and I heard myself say, "What'd she do?" The whole platform went even quieter, which I didn't think was possible. "That is not your concern," the officer said. "It kind of is, though," I said, "and I don't know where the nerve came from. Because you're standing on my platform on a human station, telling me a person I just saved from drowning is a capital fugitive, and you won't tell me what she did. So I'm asking, what did she do? Did she kill somebody, steal something? What?" The officer was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the flat translator voice had gone even flatter, if that's possible, and I've come to understand that with the Drivka, that flatness is the sound of them getting dangerous. She exists, he said. That is her crime. She should not exist, and after tonight she will not. Now, I need to stop and tell you what I knew about the galaxy in that moment, which was almost nothing, so you understand how strange those words were. I knew there were a lot of species, thousands. I knew some were big and rich and ran things like the conquered, and some were small and poor and got run, like us. I knew there were old wars and old grudges I'd never bothered to learn. I was a dredge foreman on a water world. Galactic history was for people with cleaner jobs. But even I knew, you don't hunt a person across the stars with 3 war cruisers for existing. I looked back down at her. She was looking up at me now, not at the soldiers, those big amber eyes, and she did something that broke my heart a little, though I didn't have the word for it yet. She shook her head. Just slightly, left, right, as if to say, don't, as if to say, not for me. She'd understood enough. She knew what he'd offered me, the step away, and it's forgotten, and she was telling me to take it. She didn't want me to die for her. I've thought a lot about what makes a person. Not a human, a person. Whether it's the shape of you or something under the shape. I met the answer that night on a wet deck, and the answer had fur and claws and had just shaken her head to save the life of a stranger who'd already saved hers. No, I said to her, not to him, no. And then a lot of things happened at once. The officer made a small gesture with one of his 4 hands. 2 of the wardens moved forward, lances leveled, to take her. She moved. I've never seen anything move like that. 1 second she was slumped and beaten against the cargo strut. The next she was up and low and gone sideways, and the first warden's lance shot cracked into the strut exactly where she'd been and blew a chunk of it into slag. She went under the second warden's reach, came up inside his guard, inside 4 arms. Think about that. And did something to his knee joint with both her hands and all her weight, and the joint went the wrong way with a sound like a snapping cable, and the warden went down roaring. But there were 10 more, and she was hurt and slow from the water, and this was never going to be a fight she could win. 2 lances came up to fire, and I absolutely knew, that in 1 second she was going to be dead. So I did the only thing a dredge foreman can do. I hit the emergency dump. Every dredge platform has one. It's a big red guarded switch that in a real emergency floods the loading shelf and tips it, dumping a snagged hull back into the sea so the whole platform doesn't capsize. It's a last resort. You lose the hull, you lose gear, sometimes you lose the shelf. But it moves a lot of water very fast, and it tilts the deck to nearly vertical in about 3 seconds. I slammed it with my bloody hand. Klaxons, red light, and the loading shelf under all of us groaned and dropped its edge, and the sea came up over the lip in a black flood, and everyone, wardens, crew, all of us, lost our footing at once as the deck tilted toward the water. In the chaos I lunged and grabbed her wrist. She grabbed back, hard, and I did the second only thing I could think of. I jumped, and I pulled her with me. Off the tilting shelf, past the sliding soldiers, into the black water of a world that is nothing but water all the way down. Cold, God, the cold. That deep water on Havix is a few degrees off freezing, and it goes into you like nails. But I know that water. I've worked it for years, and I knew something the wardens didn't. Under Dredge 9, running down one of the gravity anchor cables, there's a service conduit. A maintenance tube. We use it to inspect the deep spikes without sending a full sub. It's got airlocks every 200 meters and it drops down into the dark toward the crust. It's a horrible cramped place and divers hate it, and I'd bet my life the Conquered had no idea it existed, because why would they? I bet my life on it and hers. I got an arm around her again, 3rd time that night, and this time she didn't claw me. This time she held on, and I kicked for the anchor cable I knew was right below us. She helped. She was a stronger swimmer than me, even half drowned. She just didn't know where to go, and I did. We found the first airlock in the dark by feel. I slapped the pad. It cycled. It let us in. It closed behind us, and the water drained out of the little steel chamber, and we lay there on the grated floor in a spreading pool, gasping, alive, in a place 3 war cruisers couldn't easily follow. For a long minute we just breathed. I looked at her, she looked at me. Water dripped off both of us and rang on the grate. My arm was a mess. Her thigh was bleeding into the puddle in dark ribbons. And she laughed. I didn't expect it. It came out of her as a low, chuffing sound, whiskers twitching, amber eyes bright, and even through a translator I knew a laugh when I heard one. It was the laugh of somebody who was supposed to be dead and wasn't. I'd made that exact laugh 20 minutes earlier on the deck. I started laughing too. The two of us, bleeding on a grate at the bottom of the sea, laughing like fools while the world's most powerful government looked for us in the wrong ocean. Then she said something, words, in her own language, low and rolling. And her wrist unit, she had a battered wrist unit, half dead from the water, coughed and translated in a small tinny voice. "You are," it said, "very stupid." I laughed harder. "Yeah," I said. "I get that a lot." "Why," she said, and the translator caught up to her word by word, "why did you do that? You do not know me. He offered you your life. Why?" And I gave her the only answer I had, the true one. "Because you were drowning," I said, "and then you were about to get shot, and I had hands both times." She stared at me like I was a puzzle with a piece missing. Then she said her name. "Nera," the translator said. And then quieter, a word the translator struggled with, tried 3 times and finally landed on, Kaelvan. I didn't know what it meant. I do now. It meant everything. We couldn't stay in the airlock. The Concord would search the station eventually, and the conduit was only safe for a little while. But she was hurt, and I was hurt, and we needed to get somewhere with a med kit and a door that locked, and there was exactly one place on Tidehold I trusted for that. My quarters. Deck Sub 12, down in the guts of the station where the important species never bothered to go, among the human workers and the machinery and the smell of hot oil. If you want to hide from the powerful, hide low, where they think nothing worth having lives. Getting there was its own story, climbing the conduit, cutting through a coolant crawlway, me pulling Nera through gaps and her pulling me up ledges, the two of us learning each other's strength in the dark. But we made it. I got her into my cramped little cabin and locked the door and dropped the manual bolt, and I got the med kit down off the shelf, and I finally got a real look at her in the light. She was beautiful and she was wrecked. That gash on her thigh needed sealing. There were older wounds under her fur too, scars, burns, the mark of a hard cuff on one wrist that had healed badly. This was somebody who'd been running a long time and hurting the whole way. I did what I could. I'm no medic, but you learn field patching on the dredge. I cleaned the thigh wound and sealed it with skin foam, and she let me, watching my hands the whole time, tense as a wire, ready to bolt or fight. Then she took the kit and did my arm, and her claws were careful, so careful, cleaning the mess she'd made of me, and neither of us said anything about the fact that she was tending the wound she'd given me. When we were both patched, I made calf on the little heater and gave her a cup, and she smelled it and made a face and drank it anyway, and I sat on the floor with my back against the bunk and I said, "Okay, Nera." I dumped my haul and jumped off my own platform, and I've got the whole Concord looking for me now. I think I'm owed the story. What did you do? Why do 3 cruisers say you shouldn't exist? And she told me. She told me slow in her rolling language, the little wrist translator turning it into flat words. But I didn't need feeling from a machine because I could see the feeling in her the whole time. The way her ears moved. The way her tail, I hadn't even clocked the tail till it curled tight around her ankle, went still and then lashed. Here's what she told me. Her people, the Kaelvan, were old, older than the Concord, older than most of the species that now ran the wheel of the galaxy. And once, a long time ago, they'd ruled a good stretch of stars themselves, not cruelly, she said, though she would say that, but by her telling they were keepers more than conquerors. Her people held knowledge, deep knowledge. The kind of thing you build over 100,000 years and store not in machines but in living minds, passed down, generation to generation, a library that walked and breathed. And then the conquered rose. And a rising power does not like an old power sitting on secrets it can't read. There was a war, long before Nera was born. A long, quiet, ugly war, the kind that doesn't make it into the speeches. And the conquered won it the way the powerful win, not just by beating the Kael'van but by deciding they had never really existed. They erased them, wiped the records, declared the species extinct, a footnote, a legend, a thing that maybe never was. Because a dead legend can't hold knowledge over you. A dead legend can't rise again. They told the galaxy we were gone, Nera said. For 100 years the galaxy believed it, and for 100 years a few of us survived in the dark, hiding, moving, never in one place, never in the light, because if the conquered learned that even one Kael'van still lived, it would prove the greatest lie of the assembly was a lie, and they would burn a system to keep that lie. She looked at me. I am the last of the keepers, she said. Not the last Kael'van, but the last who carries the whole library. The others who survived, they saved themselves. I was chosen to save the knowledge. Everything my people ever learned, 100,000 years of it, it is here. She touched her own temple with one claw. In me. That is my crime. That is why 3 cruisers came for one person in the dark. Not for me, for what I carry. They do not want to capture me. They want to make sure that when I die, the last true record of the Kael'van dies with me. Then their lie becomes true forever. The little cabin was very quiet. The station hummed around us the way it always did. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? I'm a dredge foreman. I move rocks out of water. So I said the thing I was actually thinking, which was small and human and maybe stupid. That's a lot to carry alone, I said. Nera went still. Her ears came forward, and she looked at me for a long time with those amber eyes, and then the translator, very quietly, gave me her answer. Yasfet said, it is. And I saw it then, the thing under the warrior and the fugitive. She was tired, not sleepy tired, bone tired, soul tired. She had been carrying 100,000 years of her dead people around inside her skull for who knows how long, alone, hunted, unable to set it down for 1 hour, unable to trust one living soul, because one wrong soul meant the end of everything her people had ever been. And a stupid human had jumped off a platform for her, without even knowing her name. We didn't sleep much that night. There wasn't time and neither of us wanted to. We talked. She asked about humans she'd heard of us but written us off, the way everyone did, as loud upstarts good for hard labor. I told her about Tidehold, how nobody thought we could hold a drowning world and we held it anyway, how the big species laughed and then came to trade. She listened to that harder than I expected. Something in it seemed to matter to her. Your people, she said at one point, they should not be able to live here. This world should have killed you. Yeah, I said, we get that a lot too. But you did not sink. No, I said, we built walls out of the water that was trying to drown us, turned the thing that was supposed to kill us into the thing that keeps us up. I shrugged. It's kind of our whole deal if I'm honest. Somebody says we can't, we figure out how. She was quiet a while. The conquered believes it has already won, she said finally. It believes the Kael'van are a closed book. It has believed this for 100 years, and belief becomes truth if it is never tested. She looked at me. You do not seem to believe in closed books. I dredge things up out of the deep for a living, I said. Nothing's ever really gone, it just sinks. I meant it as a small thing, a dumb line, but she looked at me like I'd said something enormous, and maybe I had, because I didn't understand yet what she was about to ask me for. They found us at shift change. Of course they did. The conquered doesn't lose a cent. By morning they'd pulled the station manifest, and it doesn't take a genius to check who was foreman on the platform where their fugitive surfaced. My name was on the dump switch log. My name was on the cabin assignment. They came down to Sub-12 with a full squad and they came to my door. I heard the mag boots in the corridor, that heavy synced clank the Drivka make. And Nara was up in an instant, low, ready, and I saw her decide something in half a second. She decided to give herself up, to save me. She actually reached for the door bolt, to walk out and hand herself to them, and the library of 100,000 years with her, so that a dredge foreman she'd known for one night wouldn't get shot. I got there first. I put my hand flat on the door and I said, "No, we're not doing that." "Rourke." "We're not," I said. "You spent 100 years not getting caught. I'm not going to be the reason it ends in my crummy cabin on the worst deck of the ugliest station in the galaxy. No, we're going to think." "There is nothing to think," she said. "There is a squad in the corridor and one door." And she was right. There was one door and a squad. And two of us both hurt. But here's the thing about being human that the big species never account for. The thing that has saved us every single time somebody's decided we should sink. We cheat. Not honorably. Not cleanly. We look at the rules of the situation, the ones everybody's agreed are the rules, and we find the one nobody's watching and we go through that. How much of that library, I said fast, low, is knowledge, real knowledge, science, engineering, the stuff you build things with? She blinked. Much of it, most. Why? Because the conquered thinks the only thing you're worth is silence, I said. They think you're a secret to be killed, but you're not a secret, Nara. You're 100,000 years of how to do things. You're the biggest library alive. And nobody kills a library. You know what happens to a library the second the whole galaxy knows it exists? I grabbed her shoulders. It becomes too valuable to burn. You can't quietly erase what everybody's watching. The conquered's whole game is the dark, so we drag you into the light. She stared at me. "You cannot fight a squad," she said. "I'm not going to fight the squad," I said. "I'm going to broadcast." Tidehold has a station-wide comm array. Old, human-built, patched 100 times. It pipes to every deck, every dock, every ship in the harbor, and this is the part that mattered. It hooks into the open trade channels that carry to the relay buoy, which carries to the next system, and the next, all the way up the line. It's how a mining station full of the galaxy's forgotten workers stays connected to the wheel. It's not secure. It's not private. That was the whole point. From my cabin panel, I could reach it. I had foreman override. I could put a voice on every screen and every speaker from here to the relay buoy in about 90 seconds. The warden started cutting the door. I keyed the array, live, open, everything. And I shoved the pickup at Nara and I said, "You've got about a minute before that door opens, so don't tell them who you are. Tell them what you know, prove it. Give the whole galaxy one thing out of that library that the conquered would kill to keep buried. Right now. Go." She understood. God, she understood fast. That was the thing about her. You gave her a lever, and she found the fulcrum in a heartbeat. She looked into the pickup, and she spoke, and the open channel carried her voice to every deck of Tidehold and up the line to the buoy, and out into the dark to whoever was listening. And someone is always listening. She didn't beg, she didn't explain, she just started teaching. She gave them a proof, something out of Kelvin science, a way of anchoring gravity fields that was cleaner and older and better than anything the conquered had. She said it plain, step by step, the real math of it, the kind of thing a dozen engineers on a dozen worlds could check in an hour and know was real. And she said, calm as still water, "My name is Nara, I am Kelvin. The conquered told you my people were extinct. The conquered told you we never held anything worth keeping. I have just given you something we held, and any engineer among the 1,000 worlds can prove it is true and prove it is ours. We are not extinct. We are not a legend. There is a war you were never told about, and a library you were told to forget, and it is standing on a human mining station called Havoc's Tidehold, and the Concord has sent 3 cruisers to make sure you never hear its voice again. You are hearing it now." The door blew open. The wardens came through. And they stopped. Because every screen on the station was live, every speaker. The channel light was burning red hot. And the Burns Card officer, coming through my cabin door with his lance up, looked at that live channel light, and I watched 100 years of certainty crack behind his skull-face eyes. He couldn't shoot her now, not on an open channel carrying to 1,000 worlds. The whole game was the dark, and I'd flooded the room with light. If a Concord warden gunned down a self-proclaimed Kael'van keeper live on the open trade band, right after she gave the galaxy a working piece of science it could verify, the lie wasn't buried anymore. It was exhumed. On the record. Forever. Kill her now and they'd prove her right in front of everyone. He knew it, I watched him know it. "Cut the channel," he said. "Can't," I lied. "Foreman lockout." Takes the station manager's key and he's asleep 3 decks up. "You want to go wake him?" I shrugged, and I was so scared I nearly threw up, but I shrugged. "Or you can stand there and be on galactic broadcast pointing a gun at a librarian. Your call. Everyone's watching either way." I'd love to tell you they surrendered. They didn't. The Concord doesn't surrender to a dredge foreman. But they left. Not fast. Not gracefully. The officer stood in my ruined doorway for a long, long moment, 4 hands very still, and then he lowered his lance a few degrees, and he said, in that flat, dead translator voice that I'd come to understand meant fury held on a chain, "This is not finished, human." "Probably not," I agreed. "You have no idea what you have started." "No," I said, "but she does. And now so does everybody listening. So I guess we'll find out together." He looked at Nera one more time, and something passed between them, 2 very old things, an empire and the ghost it thought it had killed, looking at each other across a cramped human cabin at the bottom of a drowning world. Then he turned and he took his squad and he went back up to his cruisers, and the 3 gray knives lifted off tidehold and climbed into the clouds and were gone. Because I was right about the one thing that mattered. You can't quietly erase what everybody's watching. The dark was where they were strong, and we dragged the whole thing into the light. That was 2 years ago now. I wish I could tell you it all worked out clean. It didn't. Nothing does. The Concord didn't fall. The war she told me about didn't suddenly get taught in schools. Power protects itself, and a lie 100 years old has deep roots. But the broadcast went out and it couldn't be called back, and across the 1,000 worlds engineers checked Nera's proof and it held. It was real. It was old. It was Kael'van. And once a few thousand people know a thing is true, you cannot make it a legend again no matter how many cruisers you own. Others came out of the dark. That's the part that still gets me. The other survivors, the ones who'd saved themselves instead of the library, scattered across the galaxy for 100 years. They heard her voice on the open band, and one by one, careful, they started to answer. Not many, but some. Enough. The Kael'van weren't extinct anymore, and now everyone knew it, and the knowing was armor. Nera didn't have to carry the whole thing alone in her skull anymore. Bit by bit, she started setting it down, teaching it, sharing the weight out among the ones who came back the way it was always meant to be carried. I watched the bone tiredness go out of her, slow, over months. I watched her set down 100,000 years one careful piece at a time. That was better than any of it, better than beating the Concord. She got to put it down. She stayed on tidehold a while, said she liked it, said there was something right about a people who took the water that was supposed to drown them and built their walls out of it. She said her people used to be like that before the dark. She said maybe they could be again. Then one day she left, the way she was always going to, out into the wheel of the galaxy to gather the scattered library and the scattered people and put a species back together out of ghosts. She had work to do that would take the rest of her life. I understood. Before she went, she came down to Sub-12 one last time, to my crummy cabin on the worst deck of the ugliest station in the galaxy. And she stood in the doorway I'd never gotten around to fully fixing, and the wrist translator was newer now, and when she spoke it had feeling in it, and she said, "You had hands, Rourke, both times. Do you know how rare that is? Not the hands, the using of them. Half the galaxy has hands and keeps them in their pockets while someone drowns." "It wasn't a big thing," I said, "because it wasn't, and because I never learned how to take it when somebody thanks me." "It was the only thing," she said. "The whole library of my people, 100,000 years, and none of it, not one page, told them what a stranger with wet hands did in the dark on a station no one important had ever heard of. That is not in any book. That has to be done, every time, by someone, in the moment, or it is not real." She looked at me with those amber eyes one last time. "You made it real. The Concord had a lie 100 years old, and it took one human with wet hands to sink it. Remember that when they tell you your people are small." Then she was gone. So that's the story. The whole thing slow, the way it really went. People ask me why I did it, why I jumped. Strangers, when they hear the tale, they always ask that like there's supposed to be some big reason, some grand thing. And I never have a good answer because there wasn't one. There was a person drowning and I had hands. There was a person about to get shot and I still had hands. That's all. That's the whole thing. But I'll tell you what I've come to believe. Working these long nights out on the deep water, dredging things up that everybody thought were gone for good. Nothing's ever really gone. Not a species. Not the truth. Not the last page of a dead people's library. It just sinks. It goes down into the dark where the powerful hope you'll never look. And every once in a while, somebody with wet hands reaches down into that dark and pulls it back up into the light. That's the whole job, if you ask me. That's the only job that ever really mattered. We didn't sink. Neither did she. I told you it didn't work out clean. I said that near the end, remember. I said the Concord didn't fall and the war didn't get taught in schools and power protects itself. And then I skipped ahead. I went straight from 3 cruisers lifting off to 2 years later, to Nara setting down her library and leaving, to the good ending. I skipped a part. I skipped it because it's the part that still wakes me up. But you sat with me this long and you believed the first half, so I'll trust you with the rest. The part between the cruisers leaving and Nara leaving. The part where I found out what the officer meant when he stood in my broken doorway and said, "You have no idea what you have started." He was right. I didn't. Let me tell you what I started. The broadcast went out. That was real. That all happened exactly like I said. Nara's voice carried up the line to the relay buoy and out into the wheel of the galaxy, and the proof held, and the Concord's warships climbed into the clouds and were gone. And for about 9 days, we thought we'd won. 9 days is a funny amount of time, long enough to relax, long enough to start believing the quiet. The station went back to work. The night crew ribbed me about my arm, which was healing into a scar the exact shape of an alien's claws, and Kesh started calling me the Fish Whisperer, and Nara stayed down on Sub-12 out of sight, and every day a few more messages came in on the open band from far-off places, careful messages, coded ones, from people who'd heard her voice and dared to hope. She'd sit at my little cabin panel for hours, reading them, and I'd watch her ears come up a little more each day. 9 good days. On the 10th day, the star at the bottom of the well went out. That's what it looked like from where I stood. I was up on the observation gantry taking my break, looking at the ocean the way I do, and I watched the light change. That thin far coin of a sun, the one that gives havocs its cold gray day, something slid across it. Slow, enormous. I've seen the cruisers. 3 gray knives and they'd scared me half to death. This was not a cruiser, this was a slab. A wall of ship, kilometers of it, hull the color of a healed burn, coming down out of the high dark so big it eclipsed the sun and dragged its own shadow across the whole ocean like a coming night. It didn't scream and fast the way the cruisers had. It didn't need to. It came slow, the way a landslide comes slow right up until it doesn't. I knew what it was before the station alarms caught up. Everybody did, some old animal part of us. When a thing that size shows up over your home, your body understands before your mind does. A conquered dreadnought. An assembly capital ship. The kind of thing that doesn't get sent to capture. The kind of thing that gets sent to erase. They hadn't come back for Nara, they'd come back for all of us. The station manager's name was Odell. Older than me, softer than me, spent his days 3 decks up in a warm office pushing manifests. Good man, in the way that a man who's never had to be brave can be good. I got called up to his office because by then everybody knew whose cabin the Leopard woman was hiding in, and when the biggest ship any of us had ever seen parks over your home, you go find the person who started it. The dreadnought had opened a channel, one channel, to the whole station. And when I got to Odell's office, the message was already playing on a loop on his wall screen, that flat, dead translator voice I'd learned to hate, and this time it wasn't an officer talking. This time it was the ship itself, or whoever sat at the top of it, and the voice had no scar and no chain on its fury. It was calm. Calm is worse. Havoc's tide hold, it said. You are in possession of contaminated information. A prohibited entity has broadcast falsified Calvon material on open bands originating from your station. Under assembly statute, contaminated stations are subject to full sterilization. You have 1 rotation to comply. Surrender the entity and all recording media. Purge the broadcast archive. Submit every soul aboard to memory audit. Comply, and tidehold is spared. Refuse and tidehold is unmade, and the record will show a mining station lost to a deep-water storm. There is always a storm on Havoc's. No one will ask. The channel closed. The office was very quiet. Odell was gray in the face. His hands were flat on his desk like he was holding it down. 1 rotation, he said. That's work, that's 11 hours, I heard. They'll say a storm took us. He laughed and it came out cracked. And they're right. Nobody asks about a storm on Havoc's. We're not anybody, Rourke. There's 4,000 people on this station and none of us are anybody. They can do it and the galaxy will read a weather report. That was the whole horror of it, wasn't it? That's the thing the conquered counted on, the thing they'd counted on for 100 years. The dark. The out of the way. The nobody asks. They tried to bury Nara in silence and we dragged her into the light. So now they just bury the light too, the whole station. 4,000 souls, under a storm that no one would question because who watches a mining rock at the bottom of the map? Odell looked at me. And I watched a soft man arrive at a hard place, and I felt sorry for him, because I'd already been through that door on a wet deck 10 days ago, and I knew how much it cost. If we give her up, he said quietly, we live. Yeah, 4,000 people, my people. I'm responsible for them. If I hand over one person who isn't even one of ours, 1 person we didn't ask for, he stopped. He couldn't finish it. To his credit, he couldn't finish it. You want me to make the call so it's not on you, I said. Not cruel, just true. He didn't answer, which was an answer. I went to find Nara, she already knew. Of course she knew. She was standing in my cabin with the storm shutter open, looking up through the gantry glass at the underside of that vast burned hull filling the whole sky, and her tail was still and her ears were flat and she didn't turn around when I came in. I have done this to your world, she said. The translator was the new one, the one with feeling, and the feeling in it was awful. I have brought the end here to the people who saved me. You didn't bring anything, I said. They did. You should give me to them, Rourke. She turned, amber eyes wet at the edges. Listen to me. This is not the platform. This is not 1 squad and 1 cabin door. This is a capital ship. There is no lever here. There is no light to drag them into. They will unmake 4,000 people to keep their lie, and they will do it whether or not I am aboard unless I walk out and end it. So I will walk out. I have carried the library 100 years to keep it from dying. I will not let it be the thing that kills your people. Let me go, please. Let me put it down this way. And you know, for a second I almost did, because she was right that this was bigger. She was right that there was no lever, not one I could see. The broadcast trick worked because the Conquered's whole game was the dark, and I'd flooded a room with light. But you can't shame a dreadnought. It doesn't care who's watching. It'll do the murder on the open band and dare the galaxy to do something about it, because it knows the galaxy won't, because the galaxy never has. Light wouldn't save us this time. I'd used light. It was spent. So I stood in my cabin and I did the thing I do. The thing humans do, the thing she'd noticed about us that first night, the thing that saved us every single time somebody's decided we should sink. I stopped fighting the problem I was given and I went looking for the problem nobody was watching. You said something, I said slowly. That first night, when I told you how we built the sea walls, you said your people used to be like that. Turn the thing that's supposed to kill you into the thing that keeps you up. You remember, Rourke, and you said your library's mostly how to do things, science, engineering, the stuff you build with. I was pacing now, the idea coming up out of the deep the way they do, still dripping, not fully shaped. Nara, that ship wants to kill us with a storm, it even said so. There is always a storm on Havocs, that's their whole cover story. They'll cook up a squall, capsize the station, sail off, and let the weather take the blame. Yes, she said, not seeing it yet. That is what they will do. I stopped pacing. We live on a storm world, I said. We don't hide from the storms, we harvest them. Half the power on this station comes off the pressure differentials when a big front rolls through. We've got field emitters 40 kilometers down, and buoyancy rings the size of cities and seawalls we freeze solid out of the ocean itself. We are the single most storm-ready structure in this entire system, because if we weren't, we'd have sunk 100 years ago. I looked at her. They want to kill us with the one thing we're better at surviving than anything alive. And you're carrying 100,000 years of how to bend physics that they've never even read. Slowly, her ears came up. You are not thinking of hiding from the storm, she said. No, I said. I'm thinking of building a bigger one. Here's what a dreadnought does when it sterilizes with a storm. Nara knew the doctrine, it was in her library, buried in the war records of her dead people, the exact method the conquered had used to erase inconvenient places for a century. The ship seeds the upper atmosphere, drops the pressure, and pulls. It uses its own gravity systems to yank the ocean up into a wall and drop it on the target. Clean. Deniable. The planet does the killing. The ship just gives it a nudge. The trouble, Nara said, and here her whiskers twitched in a way I'd learned meant she'd spotted something. The trouble is that to pull an ocean you have to anchor to the ocean. The dreadnought has to lock its gravity systems onto the water to move it. For about 90 seconds during the seeding, the biggest, most powerful ship in the sky is, in a very specific and physical way, tied to the sea. And we, a human mining station on a water world, we own the sea. 40 kilometers of gravity spikes drilled into the crust. Field emitters that could freeze the ocean solid. Buoyancy rings that could shove millions of tons of water in any direction we chose. The conquered thought of our equipment as industrial junk, dredge gear, worker toys. They never once thought of it as a weapon because who arms a fishing rod? But Nara looked at our specs. I pulled every schematic on the station and spread them on my cabin floor, and she crouched over them with those amber eyes moving fast, and she saw what 100,000 years of Kelvin physics could do with human fishing rods. Your emitters freeze the surface, she murmured, more to herself than me, claws tracing lines on the schematic. Kelvin field theory can invert the cycle, not freeze. Flash. Superheat a column instead of chilling it. And your gravity spikes, you anchor down into the crust to hold the station steady. But an anchor pulls both ways, Rourke. What holds you to the floor can pull the floor up to the sky. You're losing me, I admitted. She looked up. And for the first time since the dreadnought blocked the sun, she smiled. A predator's smile, all those long teeth, but there was joy in it. The fierce, clean joy of somebody who's been running for 100 years and just found solid ground to make a stand on. They want to pull the ocean up and drop it on us, she said. For 90 seconds, they will be locked to the sea to do it. And in those 90 seconds, we will use their own anchor point and your gravity spikes and my people's field theory, and we will pull back. Not to make a wave, to make a spear. We take the column of water they're lifting, we superheat its base into a plume of steam, and we drive it up their own gravity tether like a needle up a thread. Their ship told us how it plans to kill us. That was a mistake. Because now I know exactly where it has to hold still. I sat back on my heels on the cabin floor, and I looked at this soaked fugitive I'd pulled out of the water 10 days ago, and I understood, finally and all the way down, why 3 cruisers and then a whole dreadnought had come across the stars for one person's skull. She wasn't a secret. She was never a secret. She was the most dangerous library alive, and I just handed her a station. We had 11 hours. It took us 9. I'm not going to pretend I understood half of what we built. I understood my half, the human half. Rerouting the field emitters, overriding the safety governors that stopped the gravity spikes from ever pulling upward, coordinating a night crew who'd signed up to move rocks and were now being asked to turn a mining station into a weapon aimed at a conquered capital ship. That part was the hardest sell, and it wasn't Nera who made it. It was me. Because Odell called a station meeting 4,000 people, or as many as would fit on the docks and the gantries and the rest listening on the comm, and he stood up there gray in the face and he laid it out honest. Give up the stranger and live, or fight a dreadnought with fishing gear and probably die all of us tonight. And then he did the one brave thing of his soft life. He said, I can't make this call for you. It's not mine to make. So I'm putting it to the station, 4,000 people, nobody, workers on a rock at the bottom of the map. The kind of people the conquered counted on, the kind nobody asks about. I got up on a cargo crane so they could see me and I didn't have a speech. I'm no good at speeches. I just told them the truth the way I'm telling you. 10 days ago I pulled somebody out of the water, I said, because she was drowning and I had hands, that's all it was. And now they want to drown all of us to cover it up and call it weather and sail away and let the galaxy read a storm report. They've done it before, to 100 places like us, places full of people like us, nobodies, and every one of those places gave up and got called a storm. I looked out at them, Kesh, Toomey, Odell. 4,000 tired faces in the drone lamp light. They built this whole galaxy on the idea that people like us sink, I said, that we're too small and too far away and too poor to matter, that we'll always hand over the stranger to save our own skin because that's what small people do. My voice cracked and I let it. I don't want to find out they're right. I've spent my whole life on a world that was supposed to drown us, and we didn't sink. We built our walls out of the water that came to kill us. That's who we are. That's the only thing we've ever been. So I'm not asking you to be brave. I'm asking you to be us. One more time, let's not sink. He never heard 4,000 people go quiet like that, and I've never heard them come back like that either. They didn't cheer. It wasn't a cheer. It was worse than a cheer and better. It was 4,000 people just turning and walking to their stations and getting to work. The dreadnought began to seed the storm at the end of the 11th hour, right on schedule, because a thing that size never imagines it needs to hurry. The sky went the color of a bruise. The pressure dropped so fast my ears screamed and blood came out of Toomey's nose. Out over the water the ocean began to rise, a hill of black sea, then a mountain, drawn up by a hand kilometers wide, lifting toward the burned hull that filled the heavens. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen, and I have seen a leopard woman fight 4 armed soldiers on a tilting deck. They were pulling the ocean up to drop it on us, and they were locked to it to do it. Nera was at the master board with me, her claws and my hands on the controls together, the whole station's systems bent to one purpose and held on a hair trigger, waiting for the exact moment the schematics said the dreadnought's gravity tether would be at full lock. Too early and we'd hit nothing. Too late and the wave would already be falling. 90 seconds, she said. Her voice was steady, steadier than mine would have been. When the column peaks they hold, that is our window. Rourke. She looked at me one last time the way she had in the airlock at the bottom of the sea. Whatever happens, you had hands, both times. Thank you for using them. Save it, I said, and my voice shook. Tell me after. The mountain of ocean rose and rose, and at its peak it held that terrible pause at the top, the sea hanging over us like a fist about to fall. Now, she said, I threw everything. I don't have good words for what happened next. I was there and I still don't. We inverted the emitters at the base of the column, 40 kilometers down, in the black, where the gravity spikes met the crust. And instead of freezing the water, we flashed it. 100,000 years of Kelvin field theory pouring superheat into the anchor point of the sea. And the gravity spikes, the great pillars that held our station steady against every storm, we reversed them, all of them, all at once, safety governors screaming and dying, and we pulled up along the exact line of the dreadnought's own tether. The ocean they were lifting to kill us became a spear of steam and force, and it went up their own leash. The base of the water mountain didn't fall on us. It erupted straight up, a column of superheated sea driven along the dreadnought's gravity beam like a round up a barrel. Kilometers of ocean turned to a white lance of steam and pressure, and it hit the burned hull where the hull was holding still, where it had to hold still, where it had told us it would hold still. The whole sky lit white. The dreadnought, that endless slab, that landslide, that thing so big it eclipsed the sun, the dreadnought lurched. I saw it. 4,000 people saw it. The biggest ship any of us had ever imagined got hit in its own tether by its own murder weapon turned inside out, and it staggered, and its lift on the ocean broke, and the mountain of sea it had raised came crashing back down into the deep where it belonged instead of down onto us. The wave still hit the station. Of course it did. The backwash was enormous. Every seawall we had flash froze at once, drank the swell, cracked and self-repaired, cracked and repaired, the way they always had, the way they were built to. Tidehold heaved and groaned and took on water and shed it and held. We'd built our walls out of the water that came to kill us. One more time, they held. And when the white light faded and my eyes cleared, the dreadnought was still up there. We hadn't destroyed it. You don't destroy a capital ship with fishing gear, not really, but it was listing. It was venting atmosphere from a wound along its flank kilometers long, and it was hurt, and it knew it was hurt, and more than that, its channel opened. That flat, calm voice, except it wasn't calm anymore. There was something in it I'd never heard from the conquered. There was surprise. Impossible, it said. This station has no armament. This is a mining installation. You have no, and Nara leaned into the pickup, exhausted, bleeding again from where the recoil had thrown her into the board, and she answered them. And this time she wasn't teaching. This time she was just telling the truth. They have no weapons, she said. They have humans, and they have me. You erased my people because you feared what we knew. You should have feared what these people do. I gave them 1 page of my library, and they turned your own storm into a spear in 90 seconds. Imagine, conquered. Imagine what the rest of it becomes in their hands. You did not come here to bury one keeper. You came here and you armed the one people in this galaxy insane enough and clever enough to use what I carry. And now the whole wheel is watching because your dreadnought is venting on the open band, and there is no storm report that explains a hole in a capital ship. Silence on the channel. You have 1 rotation, Nara said, giving them their own words back, soft as still water, to leave Havoc's tidehold. Comply and you are spared the questions. Refuse and we do it again, and this time we have had practice. They left slow, listing, venting into the dark. That vast burned hull dragged itself back up out of our sky, and the far coin of a sun came back, thin and gray and beautiful, the most beautiful, ugly little star I have ever seen, and the shadow lifted off the ocean and it was day again. Nobody cheered this time either. We were too wrecked. 4,000 people just stood on the docks and the gantries in the returning gray light and looked up at the empty sky and breathed. Alive. All of us. Nobody had handed over the stranger. Nobody had sunk. I found Nara slumped against the master board, and I got down next to her, and neither of us said anything for a while. We just did the thing we'd done at the bottom of the sea 10 days before. We breathed. 2 beat-up people who were supposed to be dead and weren't, sitting in a spreading mess, alive. And then she laughed. That low chuffing sound, whiskers twitching, and I laughed too. And we sat there on the floor of a mining station that had just fought off a conquered dreadnought with fishing gear and a dead people's library, laughing like fools, exactly the way we had in the airlock, exactly the way you laugh when the fear has nowhere else to go. That's the part I skipped. That's what the officer meant on the platform when he said you have no idea what you have started. Because it wasn't the broadcast that finished the conquered's 100-year lie. The broadcast was just light, and they came back to snuff the light. What finished it was this. The day a mining rock full of nobodies took the deadliest ship in the sky and put a hole in it, on the open band, with tools meant for dredging rocks, using knowledge everyone had been told was extinct. That got out. That couldn't be called back either. A hole in a dreadnought is not a storm report. And once the galaxy saw what one page of the Kael'van library did in human hands, once they saw what happened when you stopped erasing the small people and started arming them, the dark stopped being safe for the conquered anywhere. Not just here, everywhere. That's when the others came out. Not after the broadcast, after Havoc's. Because the broadcast said we exist, and anybody can be shamed back into the dark. But Havoc said we exist, and now we have friends, and our friends do not sink. And that is armor 100 years of erasing could not touch. The scattered keepers heard it and answered, one by careful one, and Nera finally started setting the library down, sharing the weight the way it was always meant to be carried. And I got to watch the bone tiredness go out of her over the months that followed, slow, like a tide going out. And everything I told you at the end of the first part, her staying a while, her liking that we built our walls from the water that tried to drown us, her leaving one day to go put a species back together out of ghosts, all of that came after this. This is the hinge it turned on. I skipped it because it's the part where I asked 4,000 people to maybe die and they said yes, and they didn't, but they could have. That weight doesn't leave you. I'd do it again. But it doesn't leave you. She came down to sub-12 one last time before she left. I told you that too. The doorway I never fixed, the newer translator, the amber eyes. But there was one more thing she said that night that I held back until now because it only means what it means if you've heard the whole thing. She stood in my broken doorway, and she looked at the scar on my forearm, her scar, the one she'd given me the first night, clawing at the hands that were saving her, and she reached out and touched it, careful, with one claw. On my world, she said, before the dark we had a word for a mark like this. A wound given to the one who saves you. In the old tongue it means the debt that runs both ways. We believed it was the strongest bond a person could carry, stronger than blood. Because it is honest. It admits that saving someone is not clean. That they may hurt you while you pull them out of the water, and that you reach in anyway. She let go of my arm. 100,000 years of my people's library, she said, and the truest thing in it is a scar on a dredge foreman's arm. You reached into the dark not knowing what was down there. It cut you. You pulled anyway. That is the whole of it, Rourke. That is everything worth keeping. The rest is just how to build things. Then she was gone, out into the wheel of the galaxy, to gather the scattered and the lost and turn a legend back into a people. So now you've got all of it. The clean part and the part I skipped. People still ask me why I jumped. And I still don't have a better answer than the one I always give. There was a person drowning and I had hands. But I've thought about what Nera said about the debt that runs both ways, and I think maybe that's the closest thing to a real answer I'll ever have. Saving somebody isn't clean. They might claw you. The powerful might come for you. You might end up asking 4,000 souls to stand under a dreadnought with fishing gear. Reaching into the dark costs you something always. It leaves a mark. You reach anyway. That's the whole job. I said that before and I meant it, and I mean it more now. Nothing's ever really gone, not a species, not the truth, not the last page of a dead people's library. It just sinks, down into the dark where the powerful hope you'll never look. And every once in a while somebody with wet hands reaches down into that dark and pulls it back into the light and takes the scar and doesn't let go. We didn't sink. Neither did she. And neither, it turns out, did 4,000 nobodies on a rock at the bottom of the map. The day the whole galaxy learned what humans do with a library.